I'm Bernice Barnes, and I was born and raised in Sykesville, Carroll County, where I have lived most of my life.
And where do you live now?
I'm now residing at Carroll Lutheran Village.
And what were the people like in Sykesville when you were growing up? Was it very diversified?
Oh, definitely, yeah. It was a great place to grow up. As Grandmother always said, the best years of your life.
Or when you're growing up?
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about a typical day when you were growing up, when you were a child.
When I was in school, perhaps,
Mm-hmm.
well, it would be up early in the morning, about 8 o'clock, walk up the hill to the school. I went to the Sykesville school from the first grade all through till I graduated. And then in the afternoon, home, have a snack, have dinner. And later, when I got older, it was to go out or go dancing down at Ken's, which was a place most of our kids would go when we got old enough to do so, and home again by 9 or 9:30, no later.
What was Ken's? Was that
Ken's was a little place that they had a soda fountain, and he had a little place that we could dance with a Nickelodeon.
Oh. How much did that cost then?
Only whatever you wanted to spend, maybe a Coke or a sundae or whatever like that. That was all it cost.
Did everybody dance then?
Most of them did. We taught a lot of the boys to dance.
What do you remember about your neighbors?
Oh, we had wonderful neighbors. I used to babysit with them, with their children, and they were all great people. Some of them were older and retired, but the majority of them were very, very nice people.
Was everybody close by in Sykesville, or was there a lot of room between houses?
We lived fairly close to I lived right behind the Methodist church in Sykesville, and there was a house very, very close to us. Of course, would be a distance there to walk, but not as close as our houses are here.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. So you said that you went dancing. Did you go to the movies? Were there movie theaters?
Yes, we had a movie theater.
How about bowling alleys? Did you have
No
anything?
bowling. No bowling alley.
So what else did you guys do?
Well, that
for
was
entertainment.
That was about the extent of it. We had to found a way to entertain ourselves most of the time. And of course, as we got older, and some of the boys had cars, then they'd take us to either Mount Airy at the Browns or Westminster at one of the places here. Right now, I can't remember the name of it. I'll think of it later. But it was very good too to do that. Not like they do today, however. Not many of the girls had their own cars.
What about the school? What was the size of the school you went to, and what was school
It was
like?
The school was from the first grade through the 11th.
So you went with all your siblings. How was that?
I didn't have any siblings. I was an only child.
Well, you were probably fortunate at that time.
Yeah, I was an only child.
So what was the class size like?
Well, I beg your pardon?
Class size.
I think there were about 42 in our class at graduation.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And do you still see any of those people?
Oh, definitely, yes. As a matter of fact, we'll be going on the 4th of June, and there'll be about 6 or 8 of us, girls, who graduated together. We do that every year, and sometimes again at Christmas time.
Mm-hmm. That's nice to do that, because everybody stayed in the area.
Not all of them stayed in the area, but they're close enough, and there are a couple that live right here in the village.
Oh, neat. Where'd you go for groceries?
We had grocery stores. We had a couple grocery stores in Sykesville, and that was where we would do our shopping.
And for clothes too? Did you
Well,
have department
they also
stores?
had a clothing store, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But
Is it still around?
no, not anymore. But generally, we would take a trip. Mother and I would go into Baltimore and shop at Hoshel's and Hustler's or May Company and areas like that when we had to have something special.
Mm-hmm. What were the shopkeepers like at that time?
Well, they knew everybody as a general rule.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knew everybody in the area. That was great.
Do you remember downtown Westminster then?
Oh, yes. I can remember.
How was that different than Sykesville?
Well, it was much busier, and there were a lot more stores, more activity. And usually on Friday or Saturday nights, the streets were lined on both sides because that was only pleasure a lot of them got by coming in town. And there was a couple movie theaters there at the time. Now, I'm going back a good many years, actually, because that would have been in the early 40s, I'd say, or even maybe a little earlier than that I'm talking about. Now, since then, it's grown and grown and grown, and you don't see anything like that anymore.
How were houses different when you were growing up? Did you have as many of the conveniences? You weren't really, were you considered in the country in Sykesville?
No. We lived in the town. We lived in the town proper. And we always had modern conveniences.
Okay. What was your favorite place to go in Carroll County when you were growing up?
I had several different places to go, I guess. As I mentioned, as I got older, of course, in the teen years, was to go to, on weekends only, though. We weren't allowed to go out too much during the week, and for school, of course. But weekends we'd try to get together and go one place or the other, that either in Mount Airy or here in Westminster, at certain times, of course, depending on transportation, to dance. There were a lot of the kids from Westminster that I would know, that we knew and got to know very well, that we mingled with too.
Let's see, was there a difference in the things you did in the summer versus the winter?
Well, sometimes in the summertime, we always had an opportunity. The family would go down to Ocean City. I can remember going down there when I was maybe 8 or 9 years of age, and then later on when we were teenagers. But we never went without the parents. We were not allowed to do that.
Where'd you go to church?
Went to the Methodist Church in Sykesville.
And how has it changed from when you were growing up?
Well, I haven't been down there for a long, long time, but it's still there, and I think they have a very nice congregation as well.
What would you have liked to have changed in Carroll County when you were growing up?
Quite frankly, I don't think I would have changed anything. I had a great time when I was a child growing up. I thought everything was fine. That's the way it was supposed to be. I was perfectly happy about it.
What do you miss most about the way Carroll County used to be?
I miss seeing the farms and the cattle in the meadows and the quieter lifestyle.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because you ended up marrying someone from Carroll County, right?
Indeed.
And where did he grow up?
He grew up in Winfield.
And he was on a farm, I think.
And he lived on a farm, yes.
And
he was
so,
raised on a farm.
How was his life different growing up than yours in Sykesville?
Well, I think his life must have been like a little bit more quiet than mine. Milking cows and doing the farming and that sort of thing. They were his chores, and he was expected to do them even before he went to school in the morning.
And after you got married, did you live on the farm?
For a short time, yeah. We lived on a farm for a short time. And then we built our own home there in Winfield, but off a part of the farm.
What was the farmhouse like compared to the house in Sykesville?
Oh, quite a bit different. It was a large, very, very large house. It was, I think it had 6 bedrooms, and it was quite a nice home.
Did they have indoor plumbing?
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm. Had they always grown up with that?
Right, I've always grown up. I didn't know any different now.
I think you told me about a time when you used to barter some with produce. Your husband.
Oh, my husband did. Yeah, that's well. He still had a lot of farming about him. That's for sure, and he always had a big garden. And of course, one of our sons had a farm, and he would put out tomatoes, thousands of plants. So consequently, pick the tomatoes, and then we had to clean them, and he would take them to market. As a matter of fact, some of the tomatoes went to the White House.
That was neat, huh?
That was neat, wasn't it?
Yeah. And let's see. So how was life in Winfield once you moved into your own house?
Oh, a lot different than when I lived in Sykesville. Winfield was a very small place. And they had one store, and no, they had two stores. One was very small, and the other was on a larger size. But it was quite different. But I acclimated to it very well.
And how were the schools when your kids were going to school?
There was a school in Winfield, and both of my boys went to Winfield School, which is still there. It's a middle school now.
Do you think it's changed much since then?
No, actually, the school hasn't. It's one of the only schools, I think, in the county that has stayed like a middle school up to the 5th or 6th grade, I think.
What about how the teachers interacted with children? How's that changed?
Well, I have spent a long time since my children were in school, but they were wonderful at the time. They were the best friends to the kids. There's no doubt about that.
And what about when you were?
Same way when I went to school.
Was it stricter?
Well, we had to behave. There wasn't any foolishness. And if we didn't, then we were sent to the principal's office. Fortunately, I never had to go to the principal's office, but I knew a few that did. And consequently, he would use a board on them if they had misbehaved too much.
And did your parents ever find out about that?
Never used it on me.
But did that bother the parents then?
I don't think so, because, for instance, I'll give you a definition of it. One of the boys was just an ornery little kid, and he was getting on the bus one time, and I think he started to fight, and one of the teachers took him by the back of the neck and shook him, and he said, I guess I shouldn't have done that, because I know that what's going to happen the next PTA, that his parents are going to come in, and I'm really going to be in trouble. Well, when his parents did come in, and he saw them coming toward them, he said, oh, here we go. And when the father got up and talked to him, he said, I want you to let me know the next time he does a thing like that, because when he gets home, he's going to get it again. So they were the kind of teachers we had. They were really nice, all of them. Enjoyed it.
Now, you've told me a couple stories before about when you were married and living in Winfield, and you used to go dancing at a certain place. There was a dance hall or something up on the hill. Do you remember? Where'd you guys used to go dancing?
Well, we used to go to a lot of the Masonic things that they had around. We would come to Westminster to the Riding Club. That may have been the place I was talking about. I'm not sure.
Okay.
And then a lot of times, if we had friends in or we'd go out, we'd go down on the old Frederick Road, and there was a place down there that had a supper club. We would go there. Oh, there were so many different places that we would travel around to. Right now, I can't remember all of them, to tell you the truth.
What about the fire hall? Because Winfield's fire hall now is a pretty big piece of the community. They do a lot of functions. Did they always do that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they've always had functions, but probably a lot more now than they used to. And, of course, it's a lot larger now. Because when they first started, I don't remember just when that fire company was started, but it was a good while after I had moved to Winfield. I do know that. And the same was the one in Sykesville. Now it's huge to what it had to be. But you have to consider how different the population is now, too. So much different than it was when I was growing up, or even after I was married, to tell you the truth.
Were most of the people from here? when you were growing up,
Yes.
or did you have
Yes,
people?
almost all were local people. We knew everybody. Recognized names. Now it's entirely different. There's so many new people that have come into the county. It's grown and grown. Of course, the farms are going and development's continued. It makes a difference, but that's progress.
Mm-hmm. If you were to describe what's best about Carroll County to someone who's never been here, what would you say?
Well, I would say that it certainly is a delightful county to live in, and it's even though it's growing and has grown so much, it's still a beautiful county, I think, with the few farms that are left. And most people will tell you that have visited here that they think it's nice. Well, Maryland all together is a beautiful spot too.
Can you think of anything else that you'd like to talk about from your childhood or when you were married in Winfield or in Sykesville?
Not
Anything that you
necessarily.
remember that was especially that made it a different place than you think?
Well, the only thing I can think of that is just so touching is when when my boys were in school, and how much I enjoyed seeing the things that plays and things that they had put on and going up there, and I took a good part in the school activities, helping out with whatever it was necessary to do, and volunteered for a lot of things during that time, and I think I enjoyed that very much.
Did most of the women work then, or were most of the women active in their school with their children?
Yes, there were more women active then, and I didn't start to work until after my children were up in school several years. I went back to work, and that's another interesting possibility there too. Springfield State Hospital. That was the local focal point there altogether, because it employed so many people, and it was such a beautiful campus. It still is, but not as attractive as it was years ago. Mm-hmm. And I worked there. My mother was employed there, and so was my father for a number of years. And I would often go over there with her, and got used to the patients and all. And after I graduated from business college, I went to work there as a medical steno, and worked with the doctors. I had worked with a couple of different doctors, doing stenographic work, of course, progress reports and that sort of thing. That was very interesting until I was married, and then after a few months after I got married, I decided that it was too much to travel, even though it wasn't that far, but we didn't have that many cars at that time, so consequently it was leave the job. And then I went back to work after my children went to school, and I worked for the state of Maryland as an interviewer at the Department of Employment Security.
Where was that?
That was here in Westminster, and I worked there for 26 years after I had gone back. And very interesting work.
Mm-hmm. And so that's when Westminster was really starting to build up.
Absolutely, yes, it was.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Most of the people who worked there, were they from Westminster?
Oh yeah, mm-hmm. All of we were all of the employees in there were from Westminster, except our manager, the first manager we had when I first went there to work. He was from Frederick, but he had worked for the state up there in Frederick and then was transferred down here in Westminster. And then after that, one of the other girls in the office became the manager, and then another gentleman became the manager. Mm-hmm. So they were all local people, however. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, it's called something entirely different now, because in those days they had employment and unemployment in the same area. Now they've transferred all the unemployment benefits over into Baltimore. People just call in. They don't have to appear. Mm-hmm. But that's exactly the way it worked in those days. And one of the young men that worked there with me is still employed here in Westminster in the employment area. I don't know what it's called anymore. It's business, something about business. But he reports on WTTR all the time on Saturday mornings.
What about the banks in the area? How were they back then?
Not as many. Not as many. We had Westminster Trust and Carroll County, the Carroll County Bank, which is now BB&T. There was a bank, Tawnytown, of course, that's another area out of Westminster.
How do people handle their money differently than they do now?
I don't think they handled it that much different, really, frankly. I think they all used banking, and some of them stock market as usual. That's still doing, of course. But it was pretty much the same.
Well, we're glad you stuck around in Carroll County.
I am too.
It was good talking to you.
Nice talking to you too. Great.